Well, good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's Last Post ceremony. My name's Richard Cruz, and joining us today from the Royal Australian Navy is Rear Admiral Jonathan Mead. Today marks the 75th anniversary of the sinking of HMAS Sydney during the Second World War. The light cruiser was lost in the Indian Ocean off the Western Australian coast, following a battle with HSK Cormoran, a German raider. The incident is one of Australia's worst naval disasters, with all 645 souls lost and the location of the wreck remaining a mystery until 2008. Shortly, we will hear the story of Chief Petty Officer Stores, Lewis Nicholas Sampson, who lost his life in this incident. Tonight, we're also honoured to welcome members of HMAS Sydney, Escorts and Vietnam Logistics Support Veterans Association, ACT branch. We welcome Rear Admiral Ken Doolan on behalf of the Council of the Australian War Memorial, and current serving members of the Royal Australian Navy who are joining us for the ceremony this evening. We welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that support them. We acknowledge the members of RSL and Services Clubs Association, RSL Victoria and RSL Queensland, who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony around Australia. During this evening's ceremonies, wreaths will be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection. Australia's Federation Guard is a tri-service ceremonial unit of the Australian Defence Force. They provide a ceremonial presence at civil and military events and during visits to Australia by foreign dignitaries. The Guard will now dismount the catapult party from the tomb of the unknown Australian soldier. Could I ask you to please stand and join in singing the national anthem? If you're able, please be seated. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit, in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight we'll read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 102,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and operations over more than a century. But first we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths and floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection.
This is the story about a sailor. Today we remember and pay tribute to Chief Petty Officer Store Louis Nicholas Sampson and the ship's company of HMAS Sydney 2, who were lost after engaging the German surface raider Cormoran in 1941. A modified Leander-class light cruiser, Sydney was armed with 8 6-inch guns and was the pride of the Royal Australian Navy. Built in England, the cruiser was commissioned into the Royal Australian Navy in 1935 with a mixture of ages and levels of experience on board. Louis Sam Sampson was born on the 30th of September in 1907 in St Peters, Adelaide, the eldest child of Nicholas and Olive Sampson. As a young boy, Louis lived on the family's small farm at Crystalbrook, near Port Pirie. The Sampsons later moved to Gawler and then to Port Adelaide, where Louis and his younger brothers attended Port Adelaide Public School. Louis was working as a newspaper employee when he enlisted into the RAN on the 3rd of May 1922. He was 15 years old. His 2 brothers later joined the Navy as well. With the rating of boys second class, Louis Sampson joined the boys training ship HMAS Tingera, moored in Rose Bay, Sydney, for a year before being transferred to the supply branch and becoming a victualling boy. He then served in the light cruiser HMAS Brisbane 1. For the rest of the 1920s, Sampson's postings alternated between HMAS Cerberus, the Navy's training establishment, some 70 kilometres south of Melbourne on Western Port Bay, and the light cruiser HMAS Adelaide. In 1930, Sampson briefly served on the staff of the RAN College at Jervis Bay on the New South Wales south coast. When the college was forced to close, he was heavily involved in the transfer of the college's stores accounts to Cerberus. Towards the end of 1930, Sampson was posted to the heavy cruiser HMAS Canberra for just over 2 years before returning to Cerberus in late 1932. In 1935, he married Mary Angus Murphy and Nara. The couple would have 3 children. Sampson returned to Brisbane's company in 1935 and sailed with the Age cruiser to Britain, where it would be scrapped. When Brisbane's company was paid off in Britain, Sampson and others joined the commissioning company of Sydney. Following the cruiser's arrival in Australian waters, Sampson was posted to Cerberus for a period and was briefly posted to the seaplane tender HMAS Albatross. Sampson returned to Sydney in July 1938. Following the outbreak of the Second World War, Sydney was one of several Australian warships sent to the Mediterranean, where it demonstrated its fighting prowess, sinking the Italian cruiser Bartolomeo Caglione in the Battle of Cape Sparta on the 19th of July 1940. In February of 1941, Sydney returned to Australia, where it received a hero's welcome. Sampson was an accomplished sketch artist, and during a visit by the cruiser to Geraldton, Western Australia, in mid-October 1941, he produced a chalk drawing of Sydney, which was presented to the Sergeant's Mess at the Royal Australian Air Force Station at Geraldton. The sketch was captioned, "Good luck to the Airboys," and was signed by 14 of Sydney's petty officers, including Sampson. This sketch is now in the collection of the Australian War Memorial. On the 19th of November, Sydney was steaming back to Fremantle, having escorted a troop ship part of the way to Singapore. At about 4 p.m, the cruiser spotted a suspicious merchant ship and decided to investigate. By 5:30 p.m, Sydney had almost drawn alongside the vessel, which suddenly revealed its true identity as a German raider. Hoisting its German naval ensign, Cormoran fired its guns and torpedoes. Its first salvo slammed into Sydney's bridge. The Australian cruiser returned fire, but the raider's second and third salvos hit Sydney's bridge and amidships. The Sydney's 3 main turrets were soon out of action, but a fourth kept up fast, an accurate fire that hit Cormoran's funnel and engine room. Sydney, in turn, was hit by a torpedo between the turrets. Mortally damaged and ablaze, Sydney turned away from the raider, continuing to fight using its secondary armament and torpedoes. Cormoran was also burning. At 6:25, its captain gave the order to abandon ship. As the German sailors evacuated their stricken vessel, they watched the Australian cruiser, now only a distant glow on the dark horizon, disappear into the night. By midnight, Sydney was gone, with all of its 645 hands, including Sampson. He was 34 years old. Louis Sampson is commemorated on the Plymouth Naval Memorial in Britain. His name is also listed on the Roll of Honour on my left, along with around 40,000 others from the Second World War. His photograph is displayed today beside the Pool of Reflection. This is but one of the many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Chief Petty Officer Stores Louis Nicholas Sampson, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and in the hope of a better world.
Could I ask you to please stand for the reading of the ode and the sounding of the last post.
They have no grave but the cruel sea, no flowers lay at their head. A rusting hulk is their tombstone, fast on the ocean bed. They grow not old as we are left to grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. For in the going down of the sun, we will remember them.
We will remember them.
Lest we forget.
Lest we forget. We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Pozières or in the low scrub at Gallipoli, with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain, has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, They will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes the last post ceremony. We thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial and wish you a very good evening. Thank you.